And what I've learned in this new metaphysical approach to life, that the more you give, the more you get back. So it's like the script has been totally flipped as far as how the game of life is played. The game of life is played, it comes from giving. The more you give, the more you get back. And I find out the doors have opened up for me like they've never opened up before. Some of you are familiar with this thing called tithing. And you may have come from traditional churches where they taught you that your responsibility is to give God 10% of your money. Now I would say that if you've been taught that and you think that that God needs your money, you need to get a new God. You got a broke God, right? If you think that God needs your money, right? God don't need your money. Tithing more than anything else is to free ourselves up from the idea that there's not enough, right? So that the law of circulation will continue to have its work done with us. So I got up here. I came to Los Angeles. After I left the restaurant, I owed the IRS a lot of money. I fell into some tax problems while I was going through this semi-depression thing. I fell into some financial problems. I had spousal support I had to pay. I owed the IRS $35,000. And so it's just a whole bunch of stuff going on. But I remember I came up here and I joined this spiritual center called Agape International Spiritual Center. And in there, the founder, Reverend Michael Beck, would talk about auto-tithing and how important it was for auto-tithing. Auto-tithing means that if you were going to tithe, you give 10% of your money, but you have it done from your check and sent straight to the church so they don't have to do that. So that if the church or the spiritual center wanted to get a bigger building, the bank would see that the money was always coming in. But he also said, let me get this straight, that you don't have to tithe to any church. That anybody that you find who's supporting your spiritual growth and development should be getting 10% of your money, because when you think about it, your life wouldn't be what it is today if that person wasn't in your life, or that organization wasn't in it. So it could be a waitress. It could be a waitress that you go to a certain restaurant every week, and this waitress is giving you some information that you couldn't get anywhere else. She is uplifting your spirit like it has never been uplifted before. You leave there with food for thought that you never had before. So it doesn't have to be a church. But somebody needs to be getting 10%. And what that does, it frees you from the idea that there's not enough. And let me tell you who did this. The Rockefellers did this. The Kraft people. I remember reading a story about Rockefeller in the early 1900s. He was making about $19 a week. But he was given $1.90 of that, which is 10%. Every week religiously, right? Or spiritually, I should say. He's giving it, he was giving it up. And then when he was making $190, it would be $19. When he was making $1,900, it would be $190. When he was making $190,000, it would be 10% of that. And by the time he died, he had given away $450 million. So imagine how much he had to be making to give that away. But it was always part of his family. Even his son had been giving away hundreds of millions and stuff like that because they knew about the law of circulation. So I began to understand it, and I remember saying that at the time, things were so bad for me, I didn't even have a banking account. Because when I left the restaurant, I had bounced a couple of checks. And if you bounce checks in business, they will shut you down through every bank in the city. Won't do business with you. And so I had to, when I got my check, I had moved up to LA. They had offered me a job up here in Los Angeles and told me they'd house me and pay me good money and stuff and try to get on my feet. But I remember I was in church and I said, wow, if I had a bank account, I would actually do this 10% tithing, because since I've been here at this spiritual center, the quality of my life has begun to get better and better and better. I was hearing teachings like you're hearing tonight about how powerful we are, that there's a perfect power within us that is constantly conspiring for our good. And my life, and even though I was going through a difficult time, I knew that my life was more than a difficult time that I was going through. And so I said, if I had an opportunity to auto-tithe, I would. And lo and behold, I get my paycheck the next week. And ordinarily it's from some Mickey Mouse bank, and I have to take it to this check cashing place that charges me like $37 to cash a check. And so this week it happens to be a Bank of America check. So I said, well, I'll go to Bank of America because they're only going to charge me like $5 to cash it. And so I'm standing in the Bank of America line, and the manager walks up to me and said, can we help you? I said, well, I'm just here to cash a check. She said, well, do you have an account with us? I said, no, I don't have an account. She said, well, would you like to open an account? I said, I would, but it's a long story. She said, well, the line is long. So why don't you come with me over to my desk, and we'll talk about it, and I'll see if I can open your account. And if I can't, I'll just take your check to the front of the line so you don't lose your space. So when she goes over to her computer, and she sits down and starts putting my information, I'm thinking, this computer going to start smoking, and alarm's going to go off, right? Because my credit is so bad, right? And so after a few minutes, you know, she's on the computer, and she says, well, it looks okay, Mr. Hargrave. Looks like you might be able to open up an account. I said, bingo, wow, that ain't supposed to happen. And then I go back and I started this auto-tithing thing, right? And it didn't matter that all this money was coming out of my, you know, the IRS was getting me, my ex-wife was getting all this money out of me, but I was practicing this law of circulation. And sure enough, I wind up getting a letter about how to overcome bankruptcy in the mail. 2 weeks later, right? To make a long story short, I wound up going through this bankruptcy seminar and cleared up everything. Today I wind up buying a house about 2 years ago, which was only 5 years after this bankruptcy. And the house sold, I bought it at $275,000, it's now worth $400 and something thousand. Bought a brand new car. All kinds of stuff have happened. Because our wealth, sometimes our desperation, like I said, will lead us to places that we need to go. Like every setback becomes a setup for something greater.